Okay, folks, how are we all doing now today? And start of a fresh week, full of COVID all over the place. Jesus, God knows we're hearing so much. Anyway, enough of the depressing talk. So today, as I said, you're getting this lecture. I'm not physically there, unfortunately, but nevertheless, we can still do a reasonable job, I would hope, of all of this. In any case, we will be looking at a core concept for today's lecture, and that's design thinking. This is quite important at this particular stage now, because you know yourselves, you've got your brief to go off and devise or conceive two ideas, either a product or a service. And this is I would say, it's not that it's difficult, but it's a bit of a challenge. And usually when you put a bit of thought into this, it makes the rest of the module, and indeed the whole process, a lot easier, to be honest with you. So when as you rack your brains to come up with a couple of good ideas that you actually believe in, that are passionate, you're passionate about, and so it will actually, everything starts to fall in place then, because it's all about the process. Remember, that's the key thing. So this particular process we call design thinking. It's quite powerful, and I came across this a number of years ago, many years ago, and then got reintroduced to a more formalized version of it it must be about 7 years ago now, maybe 6 years ago, when I was doing a program with on entrepreneurial education. In other words, how to do things differently inside in classrooms and all that. So so we looked at this, but I noticed also that there were a lot of companies were using the same process to come up with new features and new add-ons to their existing products, and how could they find out more about their ideas to enhance them, to make them more appealing to customers and potential clients and so on. And so hence this should we say formulaic or process or methodology has a bit of structure to it. Now, it's not new, it's just other types of processes that have been merged together and come up with a sequence, a logical sequence of how we should actually develop new ideas and take them from concept right through to market as such. And you will notice that one of the very early starting points involves emotional intelligence. And I will be explaining this as we're going through it. That's why in the psychometric tests, it really is important to get an understanding of your awareness and your ability to be aware of your surroundings and aware of other people's emotions and so on. So that's they're all interconnected. As I said, none of this is just a little piece here and there. It's all part of a bigger picture, a system, so to speak. So moving on, we'll go straight to the lecture studio. Okay, see you shortly. So here we are back again into your studios. So let us get the show up and running. And there we have it, and let's get started. I'll enlarge the PowerPoint anyway, so as you can see them a bit better. So hopefully this is all quite clear to you. Well, of course it will, because I'm recording this locally anyway, so everything is working perfectly fine. Design thinking, as I say, it's not just another buzzword and all that sort of stuff, and it uses what's known as an agile approach. And now agile is tied back with Six Sigma and all these concepts inside in business, where we have to literally kind of think on our feet and respond and be responsive. Remember, I mentioned to you as students, this is what employers are looking for: your ability to think quickly, to solve problems, and critically think. And this process will actually help you to see things hopefully from different perspectives, and that's the core of this. This is why this is so important and powerful. So it enables you not to accept things at face value, and that's really, I mean, look at it this way. If you were constantly on Facebook and Twitter and so on, and you're listening to all the rubbish that comes out and taking things at face value. An example: this morning, Irish Examiner talked about what was it again? Oh yes, a Gardaí stopped a car and travelling from Cork on the M7, heading into Newbridge, and they stopped it, and they were at a COVID checkpoint, and they were fined €100 each, and the car was confiscated. I said, Jesus, that looks drastic altogether. I said, Jesus, sounds serious. Confiscating cars now. So out of curiosity, I just went in. I read down through it, and again, but it sucked me into thinking that there was something more going on here, and the headline that COVID-19 stop and search, and 5 kilometre travelling outside a 5 kilometre distance and so on. These people that travelled from County Cork and were stopped inside in County Kildare. The bloody driver had no insurance. That's why they confiscated the car. But it was the way that dipstick of a journalist put the caption together, made it look as though it was a COVID related stop and seize and fine and all that sort of stuff. And I said, oh, but that's so typical. So, if you were to take things at face value, and many people do, they just read the headlines and it forms a perception in their head. And this is what I'm trying to encourage you as intelligent people. Don't just take things at face value. That look for detail, look for counter argument, and that's exactly what happens for example, when you're doing your dissertations for your masters or even PhDs and so on and so forth, which many of you will do. The point about it is your ability to be able to see different perspectives of a point or a point of view, different sides of the argument or multiple sides of arguments, and excuse me, and that's what this process essentially helps you to do. So, what makes these great products, for example? So you look at these products and just flicking through them and so on. So, I mean, they're all novel. I mean, we're looking at here at this one down here, because I don't have my laser pointer. I'll have to use my mouse. But if you look at this one down here, you have Amazon Prime using drones to deliver packages. Will this actually take off? Excuse the pun. Probably not. I don't see it as a major runner because, crowding airspace and so on and so forth with all of this sort of stuff. Maybe it might have applications, in delivering medicines and critical supplies, small stuff to remote areas. That's a possibility. Nevertheless, and then you look up in the far corner there, you have your mobile phones. Again, great products, the Apple iPhone, for example, when it first came out, having all these interactions, and all of the subsequent phones, so Apple basically merged an entertainment platform, an MP3, with mobile phone technology, and hey presto, you had the iPhone. But other companies with Android-based systems also started to develop these platforms, and now they're becoming entertainment and devices as opposed to pure telephones for talking to people and sending messages. They were the original two functions. Now they're doing so much more. And now they're even moving into the health space when everyone is tracking their fitness levels and so on. So all sorts of wearables are being used to synchronize with their watches and so on and so forth, and tell you we've got 7.25 hours of sleep last night. 3 hours of this was quality sleep, and we begin to be, almost slaves to the technology sometimes. But you look at Netflix down here. I mean, that's a great product. I mean, what's the difference between Netflix and Disney Channel and Amazon Prime, for example, in terms of their offerings, or indeed Sky or any of these other offerings? The interesting take from Netflix was that they were listening to their customers, and they analyzed their customers, watched they're collecting phenomenal data about the viewing. Is the way, how many people, why the ratings, for example, at the Toy Show were so high, because they analyzed the data, who's looking at it, and blah blah blah. But in the case of Netflix, they went one step further, and one of the biggest selling propositions or attractions of Netflix is that you can binge. So, for example, when a new series comes out, when they started bringing out Breaking Bad and Orange is the New Black and so on, so on, so on, you could binge watch these episodes. I'm sure you might have subjected yourselves to the weekend parties and pizzas of just watching when they came out on a Friday afternoon, bang, stayed at it until as small as a Saturday or Sunday morning and so on. Nevertheless, it was something that was unique. And also, there are no ads in any of these programs. A straight run through. And if you ever look at the episodes, what might be an hour on TV is about 40 minutes, 45 minutes, maximum 50 minutes on a Netflix episode, so start to finish. And it keeps people, and of course you can pause it and stop it and go out and do all, and some say, hey, yeah, but you can still do that in your Sky. Maybe so, yes, fine. But for the most part, it's a continuous, so it gives the customers what they want. And that's the critical point about this. Now, where does this bring us into? Normally, when we look back, you have two basic driving forces. You have business and you have technology. So business is looking for a technological solution, or technology will drive some new business idea and so on. That's traditionally might have been the case. Okay, but there's a missing element and a core element to this, and it's quite simply this: the human interaction. So what way do humans want? What way do people want to develop technology? What do they want? So companies understanding the technology and how it helps people can make a business out of it. But the important thing is getting this, as I said, this sweet spot inside here, this element in here, where you have all three connecting, where you have a good technology, people are interested, they want it, they need it, and then you can create a business from it. That's as simple as it gets. That simple Venn diagram describes the interconnectivity between human behavior, wants and needs, desires, technology, and of course business. Let's make a few bucks out of all of this if we can, and so on. So this is where, as I say, great products hit that sweet spot. Now, no one size fits all. I mean, we all use our phones for, predominantly similar reasons, social media, calling, texting, and so on. But then we tweak things. Some of us will use different versions of social media platforms. You have the usual culprits, the Facebooks, Instagrams, and Twitter. Then you might start delving down into other ones like Twitch, Vimeo, Discord, and so on, all of the above. And we end up with multiples of platforms and so on. So we start to customize, but at least what it's giving us is the ability to be able to choose and to behave differently on these different platforms. And don't forget LinkedIn. But anyway, from a human perspective, it allows us to communicate on so many different platforms, channels, ways of doing it. Each have their own unique propositions, to interact with people and so on. And so this is why the human element is so critical in developing an understanding or an insight into how people react to technology, what they expect from technology, what frightens them about technology, what they embrace about technology. And if you're in this entrepreneurial mindset, and I speak loosely of entrepreneurial mindset in a company or a startup, doesn't matter. If you're in that mindset and you can spot that need, then you can create a business. And that's where you have this triumvirate of dimensions, elements of the Venn. And if you can get the formula right, then you're in the sweet spot and you'll make money. That's what it really comes down to. So this is a process. Now in the actual slide deck that's on your Moodle page, you can, when you run into this, you can actually run this short video again it's about 1.5 minutes long. Probably not worth your while because we have more than enough coverage inside here. But here's the overview. And these are essentially the 5 steps in design thinking. We empathize the human side of it. We try to get an understanding. We try to define the understanding. Then we come up with an idea based around our understanding. Then we develop some kind of prototype product or service. And then, of course, we test it. And then if it doesn't, we go back again. So now you see the linkage between the business scope, model canvas. I'm coming back to it later. I won't expand on it just now. We'll start as we start to wrap all this up. So the 5 core components, what do they actually mean, or how do we use them? So if you take we empathize with people. So we listen to stories that people talk of, the experiences that they might have had, the pain points, what was difficult for them. If they were using a particular piece of equipment and said, this was awkward to handle, or this was too hard to use, or the instructions were difficult, and unmet needs, again, more things. This doesn't do what it's supposed to do, or it doesn't do what I think it's supposed to do, and so on. These are all the kind of things that we listen to. That's absolutely important. We listen to and take on board what people are saying. We don't try and enforce our own opinion. You have to do this, and this. We don't try and do that. We actually listen to what they are. And if you give them back what they want, you're onto a winner straight away. By way of example, I'll tell you about this. Oh, God. I regret having to say this, telling you this story. But when I was using this process, one of the briefs, we had teams and were sent out around Stephen's Green, that area, and Grafton Street of Dublin, where we were in UCD at the time. And we had to go out and find out about the use of a pram. Okay, now the Professor Susie Jarvis gave us this brief, but before we started, she brought us into the how would you say, the design thinking den, and she had these various prams. She had a small little pram which looked like a child's pram, then this rather large thing with 3 wheels on it, very big. And now Susie is a small lady, to be honest with you, and it didn't fit right. And then your regular buggy type thing, and she asked us, could we understand why she had these 3 different types of prams. And it was interesting, the stories behind it. The small little child-looking one was that she was going down to Galway to give a lecture, and she had her daughter with her, and she had forgotten to bring the pram on the train, and she called her friend's house, who said she'd babysit for her, or childmind, but thought she forgot the pram. So her friend ran down to one of the local shops and picked up this small little thing, just to wheel the kid around for a couple of hours while Susie was in giving her lecture. And that's how she had. So it met a need. A simple, quick and dirty solution. The large one, which was much bigger, there was no way it was Susie using this, but it was her husband. Her husband was 6'4", 6'5" tall, and he wanted something that he could use when he was out jogging. And this 3-wheel solution was quite large, and he was able to push, and the wheels were soft and all this sort of stuff. So that's why she ended up with that one. And the last thing was, never even thought of, asking, well, who's your husband? Who did this own? Why did you have such a problem if you're going to be holding it up like this to try and push it along? And the third one was a regular one, which was her own, and that made sense to us. So we could relate to, yeah, that's your pram, and so on. And she was kind of asking us, were these prams ours? And but it was interesting to hear the stories behind them, the experiences, and why they were being used and why she had 3 different prams at the time. So our brief then was to go out and find a solution. What could we come up with in terms of a pram that solves all sorts of problems? But how do we find out? You ask people who were using them. So, a rather difficult time approach. We had to go out and interview mothers who were pushing prams, buggies, whatever, with or without, with kids, obviously, at least one in the pram, and if they had messages and so on and so forth, or shopping, whatever they had with them, and asked them, how did they find? What was their experience? Did they have, what were the pluses and what were the negatives? And in all of this, we had to be extremely careful. We had to get photographs and then of course you had to take photographs without the children in the photographs and so on. So you had a lot. And even, I went into mother care, and they actually thought I was getting something for my grandkid, and asked them about their prams. And I was stunned. I mean, I'm so far out of the game that they had these McLaren buggies. There were a couple of €1,000 for these things. And I was like, what in the name of God are you doing this? And all sorts of gizmos and technology involved in the thing and so on. But in any case, we had to go out and ask all of these questions. and then come back and design something that would meet all of the needs. So the things like, if, for example, if you're using a buggy and you had very heavy messengers, they tended to tilt back. And did you want the buggy to be facing towards you, the kid facing towards you, or facing away from you, and all sorts of possibilities. And what if you have a second kid walking alongside, and blah 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 blah. Can you have a dual buggy converted into a single buggy, and all this? So these are all real problems that mothers with newborns and toddlers were experiencing, and we had to collate and collect all of this information and come up with a design. As it happened, one of the designs, however outlandish it was, it caught our attention, and it was a couple of guys, and they were using a drone. And their idea was that it was run off a wristband or an armband as such, and the drone would be in close proximity to you with the kid hanging. It was almost like a stork's basket, excuse me, carrying the baby along and so on. Is it doable? In a quirky sort of way, yes. Technology is there. It would support, of course, a child. If you take any of those Amazon drones, most definitely they could support a baby's weight and so on. I mean, you can actually support humans now on some of these drones. But in any case, it was a solution. The rest of them were just variations of the same old theme. But what was remarkable about the drone idea is these guys, and that team at least, they were really thinking outside the box. So anyone, if you were jogging along, you could speed up the drone, and you can bring the drone in front of you because you see the baby, or have the drone behind you, and so on, blah blah blah. So you get the picture anyway. Whole point was this empathy, and then we define the opportunity as I described there. The needs. We get the insights as to how people are using these products, and we get more refined insights, and we get more feedback about their particular needs, why people want this, and what, is there something lacking? Is there some feature? Were the buttons too difficult to use? Were they too big? Were the instructions too complicated? And putting this all together, the more complexity you have in a product, the more baffling and bewildering it can be to consumers. So you've got to make it easy. And it was, as we say in the business, you have to take the KISS approach. Keep it simple, stupid. Okay, and that's exactly what it is. If you make it easy for people to use, they'll use more of it, guaranteed. And then, so that's phase two. So we define the opportunity, what we think is missing, or what we might add on, or what we might reinvent or redesign. And then we have this ideate the alternatives. So we need to have, as I say, flair. So collaborate. And we look at quantity as more than quality and all that. Really what we're looking at, we look at multiple possibilities. What if we do this, and this? So this is where we go into this kind of scenario testing. So I say, well, if we do it this way, it'll cost us that, but it also it will take us longer to design. Or we could have a quicker solution, far more expensive, or least costly, and so on. You look at all these, and that's the whole point. You have to think about so many things that are happening simultaneously. So that gives us several ideas to pick, and then we start refining these ideas, and then eventually, as I said, we come up with a prototype. And it's low fidelity, build 1+ idea to learn. So we go through the process. Well, can we make this? How difficult is it to make it? Do we use a 3D printer? Do we need to outsource it? Do we need to come up with specifications, tolerances, and so on and so forth for a particular product? Do we use plastic? Do we use carbon, steel, titanium, for example, if we're making a particular type of product? So in other words, do we over-engineer it or under-engineer it? Or where do we get it just right? So tolerance levels in products. That's why, for example, companies come up with an idea and they'll have a prototype sketch, and they might bring it to a design house or a design consultancy to help them design the product and give clear indication as what the product or the component is being used for, such that the engineers can go off and do all the designers can design the product, but also build in all these tolerance levels. It can work in from -5 to +40 degrees temperature, for example. Outside of that, then it becomes weak or brittle, or it must be made from a particular type of component material. And also they would say, well, regulations state you have to use this for that and so on and so forth. So they know all this stuff. So this is where we have to get the but it's a learning process, and we might find halfway through this prototyping that this is going to be too complex to manufacture, or it might be very straightforward, and therefore we could immediately run out to outsource the manufacturing of the product. A point in case is nearly 2 years now, and trust me, myself and several thousand other backers are particularly pissed off, putting it bluntly. We bought into a Kickstarter. Basically, you know how Kickstarter companies, they have an idea and they need funding, so they want to GoFundMe or crowdfund sites, and they raise money to build a product, and they I won't say lure you in or tease you, they present to you a particular product idea, and with our backing, if they get the money, they can go ahead and develop it. Well, there's a particular type of power meter pedal that this company was offering, and it came in at a really affordable price. They're still in design. They had to go back. Originally, it was to go onto the crank of the pedal drivetrain on a bike, and it was stuck onto the side, and then they scrapped that idea, and then they put it into the actual pedal itself. So when you clip in with your pedal, it'll calibrate the tolerances and the power then that's put on the pedal based on your foot and and so on. And great idea, and they have a solution. But we're 2 years down the road. You should see the comments on their Facebook page, when people say, this is a joke, blah blah blah, and that's the lighter side of the comments. But the prototype, they have had, and they totally underestimated the time to develop the prototype and go into full production. They're saying they're in production. They've both single-sided and double-sided pedals and gone through test and fine-tuned, and now they're trying to get the manufacturing. Of course, this has all been compounded with with COVID and sourcing and dealing with their suppliers, mostly in China, and then final assembly, getting the products back to Europe for final assembly, testing, and doing more and more testing. So there's nothing worse than promising something too soon without having a prototype, or without having something that's tangibly working for them. So it's a classic example, but that happens wholesale, and companies do get it wrong, and they get a lot of backlash from the consumers. No, I've no doubt they will come out with something, probably later this year, which in my estimation is even 18 months behind what they originally promised. And then, of course, as I said here, they test it. Don't talk, show them, get feedback. And that's why I told you the story. So they've been talking the talk about this product and so on, and showing pictures, and that's all we're seeing. We have never even seen a video of the product as such. But the point here is, when we develop something, or you develop a product or an idea or a service at least, that you talk to the customers and say, is this what you want, or is there anything else we should add to this? Maybe excuse me, you'd like some more features, would you like this? Or customers say, well, this part here, we don't really need that feature, that's too cumbersome, or it's not really of any use, we'd like to have this, that, and so on. So we get the feedback based on the prototype. They might say, it's too big, don't like the color, don't like the shape, could you redesign it to be slightly different, and so on. So yeah, we get all that kind of feedback, and that's the test, and that's where we learn as well. Now, even though it says here we test to learn, in actual fact we're learning through all of these instances, and that's a key point when we talk about particularly the business model canvas. It's all about learning from everything we hear, listen, and do with our customers and so on. Any feedback, even if it was someone to say, what do you think of this one, Mark? And the reaction is, yeah, that tells you something. And you said, more of the same kind of thing. Or you might say, oh geez, this is great. Even a facial reaction can give you feedback. So that's what we're trying to get you to understand is so critical about emotional intelligence. Again, I'll come back to that again. So let's see this in action. Another example, and I particularly like this demonstration of design thinking in action. So you see here, what do we have? It's an MRI. Now, I only ever had my first MRI in December, as it happens, and that's part of the reason why I'm having this doing this video today. But in any case, it looks quite a daunting machine, and anyone that has any kind of claustrophobic leniencies or tendencies will understand or would dread going into a machine like this, and it can be quite intimidating, and particularly with all the noise. And of course, if you've had these MRIs, they will they can play music to you, put on headphones and see that you're relaxed. But there's quite a lot of effort put into prepping people to take an MRI. Excuse me. See, everything is live. So in this case, and coincidentally, these have been around over 20 years now, probably going back to the 90s, and their earlier ones in the 80s started developing these machines. And even though the example that I'm going to show you in this has a different perspective. When I was doing my MBA, yeah, one of my case studies in my marketing module was about MRI scanners, and there was Thomson, GE, Philips, probably another one or two more major companies involved in this. Some of them went to the line, went to the wall. They failed, and GE was one of the later starters. But the problem was that the product designers and product engineers, okay, that's their physical, they were spending so much effort, and they kept coming back to the manufacturing unit or division and to say that we need to have faster scanning, need to be faster, and get it down, get time down, get time down, get time down. And so it was costing an awful lot of money, and that's what drove the cost of these machines up, the cost of development and so on. So there were several $100,000 at least for one of these machines. I think there's 12 or so, and maybe a few more inside in the country now. I can't remember, but one of my colleagues is one of two service engineers for these machines in Ireland alone. And but the point was that they spent so much time in the R&D phase developing the prototypes, and the product managers who were kind of half marketing, and I won't even say it, there were 3/4 marketing and a quarter product engineers. They weren't qualified engineers, but they were using this bridge, so to speak, to give their feedback, their understanding of what they thought the customers, doctors, consultants, anesthetists, and so on, so what they wanted. In other words, they assumed or guessed and thought that's what the users, the medical consultants, were going to be using this machine for. So they kept forcing this issue around time, how quickly they scanned. So as part of the case study analysis, I rang Port Yonkla Hospital at the time, and I said, I got talking to one of the anesthetists, and I asked about MRI scans and so on. And they used to have these barium meals, so they could see, trace liquids going through your body and bloodstream and all that sort of stuff. And so I asked about, in the whole process of a patient going in to have a scan, how long does it take? And she said, the actual scan or the whole process? Well, I said, both actually, I said, well, you have to come in and you have to go in the register, sign in if you're not already in hospital and being transferred down to the scanning suite. And then if you're coming in like I was going into Affidea, into a changing room, get into the open back gown and all that sort of stupidity, sign in, register and all this sort of thing. And it ended up that the actual scan only took about, geez, it was only a couple of minutes, I think, in total. But I was there about 3/4 of an hour. So proportionately, the actual scanning time was almost insignificant. And I think the real challenge was that the fear of people, but being in such a closed environment. But that wasn't the issue as such. In the bigger picture of things, it was so insignificant. So the product engineers were essentially getting it wrong. Okay, and what really they could have been focusing on was the quality of the scans as opposed to the speed of the scans. Okay, perfectly. Nowadays you have both. But back in the early days, it cost companies absolute fortunes developing these. And indeed, some companies went to the line because they just couldn't afford to keep going and lost the race. But anyway, they come forward 20 years and we have these machines still fundamentally the same cylindrical structure and slide in, blah, 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 whichever way your head is. In that case, your head is up at the top, obviously, in the brace. Now, this guy, Doug Dietz, he was one of the original designers of this. He would have been a celebrity, so to speak, in product design. If they were giving Oscars for this guy, would have gotten an Oscar for his design in this product itself. And the story behind him was that he noticed that children in particular were particularly scared of these machines, and understandably so. We do have adults that are also would be nervous and claustrophobic and so on and so forth. But in this case, particularly kids, and he observed, I think it was a 12-year-old kid, and the parents were telling him, not to be afraid, and they had to cancel the process and come back the following days because the kid was terrified of the thing. So it put him thinking, how can we make these products? And he said it was totally impractical to go off and redesign the whole unit, and there was, from the ground up to make it more user friendly as such. So he actually listens to the conversation between the kids and how they're trying to calm down, because and as much as 80 or 90% of kids in particular would have a fear of these kind of machines in this state format and so on. And he spoke to child psychologists and consultancy staff, anesthetists, and who brought in to calm people down, sometimes giving them sedatives and so on. So this was adding cost, time, and effort to all of this. Let's just call it a simple process. So he observed and he said, there has to be another solution. Now, how can I come up with something that's in effect? So the only way he was going to understand this was put himself in the child's position, try and understand it from a child's perspective. And that's precisely what he did, and said, right, okay, we can see how they're terrified, blah, 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 blah. Now can I come up with a solution? What would a child like to see in this? And this is what they ended up with. A brilliant solution. Okay, you might say, yeah, blah, blah, blah. But he turned it into a fantasy world. The cost was only a few stickers put in around on the machine stuff, made it look like one of these Disney scenes and so on. And in this case, not that they do it all the time, but the staff were dressing up in character costumes to make it more affable to the kids. In this case, they developed a pirate island, as you can see, and looking out and blah blah through the porthole and all this sort of stuff. But the staff were dressing up in costume to make it more friendly for the children as such. Perfect solution. Okay, saved a hell of a lot. There was no way were they going to redesign this thing from the ground up to make it more user friendly and so on. What could they come up with? They needed that basic cylindrical structure or design, so that couldn't be changed as such, and it needed to be in reasonable close proximity to the patient to get the quality of scans and so on. So unless they come up with some totally different technology, that's not happening at the moment. So it was a brilliant solution. A couple of hundred, as he said to himself, a couple of $100 at all costs to have these stickers literally put up on the wall and so on. Now, kid and adults coming in would say this, that, geez, at least they've made an effort, for the kids as well. So, if they do that for the kids to keep them, I'm an adult, hardly going to, I can't be getting nervous and so on and so forth about using such a system. So again, it was cool stuff, as I say, but how does this relate to the whole agile methodology? And how does this story fit into it? Well, it's as simple as this. When we understand and get an insight into what people want, need, require, would like, blah, 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 then we define the opportunity, we come up with alternatives, we develop a prototype, and then we go out and test it. And then we go back again. And this is what we call, in agile terminology, we try a bit, then we do the next bit, then we do the next bit, and then we do the next bit. So it's an iterative cycle. As you can see here, sprint 1, sprint 2, and sprint 3. That's agile methodology. And, for example, I worked with Ericsson for 18 odd years. And we used to have project managers and competency managers, and they'd have teams of people, and the competency managers, for example, would have to ensure that we'd had different skill levels with different people, C programmers, testers, web designers, blah 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 blah, and they were responsible for those pool of people, and the projects would come in and ask for those different people to work on a particular project. That was the structure, a matrix structure as it was known, and this was back in the 90s. And roll on the 2000s, and towards the mid to late 2000s, Ericsson decided that they were getting rid of all their competency managers. That's the word on the street was. And they probably would have 20 or 30 of these in the organization, and so on. It wasn't because they were downsizing or anything like that, but the engineers, the young computer scientists and programmers that were coming out of college, were introduced to this agile approach. And basically what it was taking big picture and breaking it down into small manageable chunks. So they program a small part of the feature and then test that and say, that those couple of lines of code are working. Then they go on to the next piece. So they were breaking it down. So they didn't need project managers and competencies managers standing over their shoulder and saying, we hit this deadline. So it became more of a continuous type process, getting bits and pieces. And if they made a mistake in the code, if something crashed in the code, then they knew, well, it was only those couple of lines, so we go back to where we were in the previous cycle and try and go from there again and try and rewrite another few lines of code. And they start to do the same thing with their testing and so on. So that mentality, the way of solving problems, became inbuilt and core to the actual mindset of the young graduates. And therefore, they didn't need these management layers or structures to tell them what to do or guide them in what they're doing. They were already capable of doing it. So agile, so really they started to build processes around that. And as you can see, discover, design, develop, test. That's the agile approach. And you see how it kind of links in with the design process, design thinking process itself. So small iterative steps. Key point here is that, as you can see in each of these here, you do something, you discover, you come up, you test, and then it works, and then you move on to the next. So you've learned in this area here, down this part here, you've learned something. We know it works. We know that solution works. And sorry, I need to go back one and there while I was explaining. I click forward. So, and then again we go on here. So each time you're adding to your own knowledge or to the company's knowledge and so on about the product and the service itself. So moving on, here we have individuals and interactions. These are processes and tools. And then, of course, we have working software, customer collaboration, responding to change, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, and follow a plan. So this is just breakdown. So in other words, it's a step-by-step guide to how to do things efficiently and effectively. That's what design thinking, coupled with agile methodology, enables us to do. And yourself, if you buy a complex piece of furniture from IKEA and say, geez, I have to put all this together and so on and so forth, and you look at the instructions, RTFM, read the fucking manual. Okay, just sit down, take your time, practical step-by-step approach. Everything becomes clear. You get to understand why we do this part first, why we do that part, and then we go to this section, and we take it in a logical sequence, and we follow the diagrams, and hopefully you'll end up with no bits left over, no disasters in the assembly process, which was another brilliant idea by IKEA. So now they sell you a product and you're part of the manufacturing system because you're putting their product together for them for your use. Okay, now of course they do offer a service for they can bring in or send out installers if you're totally lazy. But if you're able to use a screwdriver and to a lesser extent a hammer, but generally speaking a screwdriver, job done. You can assemble it yourself, and that was the unique selling proposition of IKEA's products, and they're really well engineered. Again, because they looked and they said, make it easy, customers will buy it. If it's usable, they'll do it, and they'll do it themselves. And that's why they put so much effort into designing their products the way they do. So this whole point, follow a plan, and so on, and use the process. This is what it fundamentally comes down to. Now, this just looks like it's just another variant of the same diagram. But here we say, what problems are we trying to solve? What research do we need, or how do we observe? How do we pick up the knowledge to develop the product or service that we're going to develop? And then we need to prioritize opportunities. So there could be 10, there could be 1,000 solutions to any particular problem or challenge and so on. But we need to prioritize them, and that's where we have to think a little bit harder. In other words, time, cost, quality, and speed to market, time to market, and all this. So we have to start putting more constraints on ourselves. How quickly, is it quick and dirty, which oftentimes works, or do we take our time and work and so on and so forth? Take your COVID-19 vaccines. Normally these take many years to develop vaccines. We're getting there in a year? Thereabouts. We're putting more and more effort in. The pressure and the constraint is time, and of course all of the rest. So looking at ways of solving the problems, and this is where we look at and they're talking about sprint backlog. So we prototype test, and so on. So this iterative circle keeps going on and on until eventually we have what really meets the customer's needs. Now up here you see up in the ideate part up here, how do we go about that? We brainstorm, and this is what you guys will be doing now. Brainstorming some ideas, having your WhatsApp meetings, hopefully, in your teams to come up with reasonably good ideas. And then we look at, create hypotheses, guesses. What do we think is going to be the case? What do we think the customer might like? Then when we have a thought, we think they like this. You go out and ask. You carry out the research. If you have a prototype, you give it to them and observe how are they using it, what way are they using it, and so on. And therefore we observe, we research, and we carry back this information. Spike stories, listen to experiences and so on, test things, user stories, end cases as often referred to, and grooming, and then small chunks, put out things in small bits, and so people find that they can solve part of their problem, or product works so far, but I needed to do more, or this part isn't annoying. For example, if you buy some of these apps, the freeware version of it is this is great, love that, but the ads are annoying me. Yeah, okay, well, we'll give you an extra line of code. You pay a couple of euros for it, and you won't have any ads on it, and you get over this. So you get the pro version or whatever it is. It's often referred to as freemium, which in itself was a brilliant idea. Give it for free, and if they want more functionality and no ads and a few other nice to have bits that are restricted to the free version, people will pay. And that model works wholesale across, so there's, as I said, it's no one size fits all. They come up with customizable versions of software applications and so on. Ultimate, happy customer. For example, I might use some video editing software here. There's a freeware version, there's a paid version, there's business, there's non-business. And then there's more features. If you're going into the business and you go into the pro side of it, it becomes far more expensive. Do I need that? Probably not. Do I need a business version? What's in the other paid or licensed versions? I get all these additional features above and beyond the free, and it means there's no watermarks. So that's what I'll pay for it. This particular version, cross between private and business, small user, single license. I don't need multiple licenses per month or anything like that. So this is what companies offer. So every one of us are happy. I don't have to spend inordinate amount of money buying a product that I might not use all the parts for, but it's still, I get a version that fits my needs. Okay, and then gives me some extra flexibility that maybe I could do this, and maybe if I get time to experiment, I could do that, that, and that. So that's the key point to it. So how do we get started into this design process methodology? I'm just keeping an eye on the time. Yeah, we're doing well. First, if you only remember, as I say, 3 things. Step into your customer's shoes. Find ways to develop visceral understanding of their attitudes, emotions, and needs. Okay, so put yourself in their shoes. And this is, do you remember me joking about this great diagram that I'd seen some years ago where I'll dig it out. I know I have it in somewhere in one of my photo galleries, and I'll keep talking about it. But you have 2 guys standing. This guy is looking at a 6. This guy is looking at a 9 on the ground. And he said, 6, 9, 6, 9. Then they swap around. Oh, I see. It is a 9. Yeah, it is a 6, and so on. So they have a mutual understanding. That simple bloody diagram, as I said, again, really encapsulates what this step is all about. Put yourself in other people's shoes. How would you like to be treated? How would you like to use the product if you were a customer, and so on? Because again, entrepreneurs and product designers can fall in love with their ideas and forget, I become used to it. Another classic example of that type of behavior is, our problem is that when filmmakers and producers, they do so many takes before they'll actually have the final edit and cut and so on. But in the process, they know all the moves, they listen to all the dialogue and so on. So they hear and they know what's been said. But you as a moviegoer, go into your IMAX and something is said across the table and you didn't hear it. That can be an issue for filmmakers, because they say, oh, we better go back onto our editing because such and such a person didn't hear that the first time around. I know what was being said. So we begin to put ourselves into the viewer's shoes and understand what the film is trying to say to us, or what that person or that piece of dialogue said. Sometimes they might be talking away from camera, they might be talking a low volume, but because the producers know what's been said, they assume that we've caught it as well, and we only get one chance at it. They might have 2 takes, 22 takes, whatever the case may be. Point being, and I'm really emphasizing this, is you've got to listen to other people. Put yourself in their shoes. And I say, some people say, you might say to me, Mark, I empathize in this, that, and the other thing. I would say, how could you? Until you've walked in my shoes, walked in my footsteps, you can't possibly know exactly what I'm thinking, exactly how I feel, and so on. So we have to empathize. We can assume that we think we know, but we need to try and experience different things. I mean, you all probably experienced a drink. You might have even experienced smoking. You might have experienced any... Doesn't matter. We learn from experience until we've experienced. And no, I'm not promoting that you go out and enjoy the crack, figuratively speaking. What I'm saying is that you might have observed, or you might have very close stories of people that have had experiences, and they might have told them in such graphic detail that you can almost live the experience with them, and so on. That's empathy. This is what we need to understand first and foremost. Don't fall in love with your idea. I've already mentioned that. So come up with tons of ideas first. So loads of different solutions. Now, I know I did say I eventually I'll show you this thing here, that this whole rig in front of me here, and so I might have a video clip of something here. But it look, to somebody to walk in here, it might look a little bit daunting, and some people, some of my family and friends said, they call it the space station and things like that, and so on, and it looks like it's way over engineered, but it's not. It's simple, because when you break it down, I likewise had to learn this stuff, test it, try it out, and simplify it. And for example, in my studio software here. Last year I had 6 different modules, and I had 2 scenes per module, an introduction scene and the main scene. So that was 12 scenes that I had to create, and all the linkages between these. This year I've got 2. General introduction scene, which you see with the background library and all that sort of stuff, and then the main scene, which is this one you're looking at now, a desk, which is a simple photograph of a desk. I used to have the RT desk, believe it or not, but the point about it is it simplified it. So I went and learned. So I how to say, I came up with multiple ways of doing the same thing essentially, and fine-tuned all over the summer, and again into last semester, kept looking at things and doing things differently, and over the Christmas then sitting down and say, well, let's try it. So I did this. So I got feedback from colleagues that say, in step 3, get customer feedback as soon as possible, share rough prototypes to help you learn how to refine your concept, then iterate quickly. And that's exactly what I do here. I go in, I test something, and I change. Okay, I'll step up this now. I'll change this structure. I'll move this. I'll put in that graphic, and I'll take out that graphic. So now I'm getting faster at doing things. And each time I'm trying something new. I say, oh yeah, that's interesting. I'll take that approach and add that in, and so on. Maybe if I do it this way, and maybe if I do it that way. So I'm constantly thinking, and that's nothing. This isn't new. I mean, that would be the story of my life. I'll think things out before I actually do them. That's reflective practice. Okay, whole other story. We'll come on to that another time when we're doing this for your professional development part 2. But you now begin to get a picture to see how all these things are linked and interactive. That's why I call it a system thinking. It's a whole concept in itself. But anyway, this is what we do. We look at prototypes, and then, as we say, discovery and insights. That's the first step. The tools and methods, as we call it, discovery. Find out, user camera study, take films of it, a journey map, empathy interviews. Tell me about your experience. Talk to me. Tell me what worked for you, what didn't work for you, and so on. I'm trying to read these without my glasses, which is fine. The power of 10. Give me 10 ideas and keep refining and working through that, and so on. So point of view, Mad Lib, and so on and so forth. So get other people to express the craziness of their idea, and which might sound crazy to you, but in reality it isn't. It makes perfect sense to them. Then you go over to the ideation and creativity section, and these are some of the techniques. Now, I'd strongly suggest right now that you guys start spending the time on this section here, this element, to develop your concept, your idea, whatever you're going to promote. Brainstorming sessions, design principles, how might we, guest questions, and so on and so forth. How do you think we might solve this, and so on. Round robin, each person has a comment. You keep going around the group and has an idea. 2 or 3 people are actually putting in, or if you're in a team of 4 or 5, each person puts in a couple of ideas, and then you refine. Say, yeah, that's good, yeah, well, and then starting to, I would say, filter the ideas down until you begin to find that you have a consensus. Body storm is if you're trying to put on some new gear or something like that. How does it fit, as opposed to body shaming. Oh, Jesus, help me. Body shaming, for crying out loud. Do you ever such shite in your life? But anyway, body storm. And then selection. So you go through these processes, and impose constraints. And that's an interesting area or element, and it kind of it can be a whole discussion on its own. And the constraints are the usual: time, quality, and cost. That's all it is. So how brilliant a solution could take a lot of time and cost a fortune. Quick and dirty solution cost you half nothing. Quality might be okay, but you get something out to meet the customer. So it's all about trade-offs. That's why we have all these other subject matters, operations, supply chain management, finance, marketing, and so on. So we have to get all these working to provide as good a quality product as cost effectively that meets the customer's needs. So customers are telling us what they want, and we have to put all the pieces together to be able to give them precisely, or as close to, precisely what they want. That's your idea. That's what you have to go through now, and at this point in the program, to come up with reasonably good ideas. And then, of course, the rapid prototyping is quite simply prototypes for empathy, prototypes to test, prototypes to decide, user-driven prototyping, and so on and so on. So coming up with, here's an idea, this is something we're thinking, will this solve your problem? And you interact with the customer, client, whatever, to see, is this what they're looking for? Will this meet their needs? Will this solve their pain? Will it solve a problem for them, and so on and so forth? And that's why we come up with prototypes. Now, in the world of business, you have to be careful. When you come out with prototypes, you don't want your competitors to find out what you're doing. You don't want them to get an insight into how you're solving a problem or the particular product or component and so on. So you have to be careful, and that's a whole other world of how cleverly you use prototypes and get information back from customers. And it has to be, the prototype may have to be of such, maybe close to final product, such that you get really valuable feedback. And then take the final jump, say, right, we can go into production now, only a few small minor tweaks. If you have to make major changes and so on, then that takes time. And that's the risk, that competitors can come in and take your idea during this, if they hear about it, which most likely they will, because they're scanning the surface. They're trying to find out what customers need as just as much as you are. And they might find, oh yeah, our cash insurance company they have a solution over there, and what way are they going about this? Maybe they're using this, and this. Maybe we should do something similar. And we already have experience in these particular types of areas, so we could probably do it faster than them. That's the whole point. So getting that's what we call it rapid prototyping. That's why, for example, the technology such as 3D printing has become such an integral part in rapid prototyping, to get something out there, to get an idea, look and feel for something. Many years ago, it used to be the clay model of a car and so on and so forth, which take days, weeks, months to develop before they get an idea of what a concept car is. They'll still use it, but now they go into an awful lot more of computer-aided design and so on to get aesthetics, look, feel and things, and then they'll develop a mock-up, and then they'll print a large, and then finally sculpt out the thing. The process is the time taken is extremely quick by comparison to many years ago. And that essentially, folks, is the design thinking process. So where are we at now? Right now you have been introduced to this process. I've given you a lot of information on that by way of description and relating experiences, telling stories and so on, precisely doing what it says on the tin and what's expected in this particular process. So just bear with me now. I just need to reduce a few things here, and let me go back to the main screen so as we can continue there. So now here we are back again into the library main scene. That was essentially the design thinking methodology and process. Extremely perfect, and clearly an awful lot of companies use this. Many companies, large multinationals, have been using this for many years, looking at testing features and new updates and so on before they actually release them, to make sure that they at least work, that there's minimal problems. In other words, the bugs aren't anyway serious. Companies are always releasing updates of software. Yourselves, you get app updates. Why there's a tweak and a bug here, there's a small feature change here, and so on and so forth. So they never get it right the first time, or they never anticipated certain ways that some customers are going to use it. Therefore, we need to build some more robustness into it, or make it a little bit more customer tolerant, and so on, so on, so on. So the companies are using this, or variants of this technique, to help them, as I said, develop more quickly and effectively. So your situation now is that you are in your teams who work on this process to develop your two ideas. do your round robin, your brainstorming, whatever it is, and come up with a consensus of what you think. So based on this process, you might talk to some people already. What do you think of this idea? Get feedback and so on. Use the process. That's what it's there for, and it will help you. And overall, what this will enable you to do in some small or major part, let's not be shy around here, this will underpin what we expect of students, and more importantly, what companies expect of new graduates, new employees. And that's your ability to think critically, or otherwise described in your student quality, critical thinkers. In other words, that you look at things from different perspectives, you empathize with end users such that you come up with a solution that will best work for your customer and indeed for the company, that's cost effective, timely, and so on. So that's it, folks. How are we doing time wise? We're a little over an hour and a bit, and so on and so forth. I don't need to hold you for 2 hours to go through all of this stuff. It's most important, and to keep it condensed in that format. Use this material. Have a look at, if you need to, you can have a look at that 1.5 minute video. It's of no real consequence anyway. I wouldn't bother about it if I were you guys. And yep, we'll see you then at the next lecture. Okay, folks, take it easy and talk to you later. Bye bye.